Okay, Boker Tov, good 8th day in the Omer, good Motzei Pesach. We pick up today on Daf Nun Aleph, 51. I mean, that's the Daf, but we pick up on Nun Amud Bet, top of Nun Amud Bet, and we are Itmar Rav Huna. So the lines that's with Rav Huna, it's about 12 lines down. We were dealing with a lot of Mishnayot about Al Minat on the condition that, and then a discussion about if a woman said, well, even though we made the condition, I was thinking something else. It doesn't matter. All those very relevant discussions for issues about Kiddushin Tos, which is an important question in Aguna issues. And this most recent Mishnah dealt with the fact that the original Kiddushin had been not good. It was Pachas Mishrei Pruta and so on, something that should have been pretty obvious it was not good. And nevertheless, we don't look at future acts like giving of gifts and reinterpret them and translate them into a new act of Kiddushin. We say she's not married at all, which is also very relevant because in some of these Aguna cases, one of the ways of dealing with it is trying to discover if the original Kiddushin had been not good, and then if the original Kiddushin had been not good, you don't look at anything that follows it as an act of Kiddushin. Although, as I mentioned, I think yesterday, there's actually a debate between Rav Moshe and Rav Yehuda Herzl Henkin, because the Mishnah talks about like later gifts don't become an act of Kiddushin. Rav Henkin said that if they're actually sleeping together, having sex together in a marital context, be as a type of a Kiddushin act that does not require as much intent to effect a Kiddushin. It's just the reality that they are having sex in a marital context that itself creates like the Kiddushin, just the de facto reality. So he actually was much stricter about that, but the general halacha has followed Rav Moshe, and that's very important in these Aguna cases. So now the Gemara continues with the following. Itmar was said, Rav Huna, again, about Nun Amud Bet, about 12 lines from the top, 15 lines from the top. Rav Huna Amar Choshim L'Savlanos. Against what the Mishnah seemed to say, he said that if somebody basically sent gifts to his wife, to his fiancée, Rashi says, if you look at Rashi, Choshim L'Savlanos, Misha Shidach B'isha. So Rashi says it's not just in a vacuum. There has to be some type of a context. They actually made an engagement, and she said yes, or he, what's that word? Not engagement. What's that word? Courted. And she agreed to it. Okay. Anyway, the Kadam V'Shalach Savlanut Beidim Choshim Shem Kiddushin. So she said, yes, I'll get married. And then he sent these gifts. We're concerned that might be Kiddushin. So there wasn't an act of Kiddushin that we would say it's all defined by the original act. And if the original act was no good, these don't mean anything. But there was also not in a vacuum. There was some discussion, some engagement. So do we interpret this as Kiddushin? And he says we do. Now, I should say that
this is before.
Debate,
This is Rashi says it's Simonos before, right?
Well, because we haven't seen an act of Kiddushin, so there was no concrete act of Kiddushin that took place. Do we interpret this as the act of Kiddushin? These are gifts normally given post Kiddushin. We have not seen any act of Kiddushin take place. We've just seen the engagement. So it is before an observed act of Kiddushin. Do we interpret this as the act of Kiddushin? Now, Tosfos, Rashi says, do we interpret this as an act of Kiddushin? Tosfos says that's not the question. The question is, do we say that since he's sending Savlanos, there's evidence that there must have been an act of Kiddushin? Okay, so that's a debate of Rashi Tosfos. Okay, so if Hunam are Choshim L'Savlanos, you're concerned that these Savlanos, when it's not again the case of the Mishnah, there was a bad Kiddushin, it's just in some period of courtship and engagement or whatever, we're concerned that these are Kiddushin or indicate that there was Kiddushin. The Rabbi similarly said, Choshim L'Savlanos, we're concerned about that this might be Kiddushin or indicated. Amar Rabba, but we asked on our position, meaning this position that we're saying that it might be Kiddushin, what about the Mishnah? The Mishnah says, that even if there's Savlanos that happen after the Kiddushin, they don't count as Kiddushin. Now there's an obvious difference. There was a bad Kiddushin that preceded, but let's see what Abai says. That's what Abai says. We know there was a Kiddushin and it was bad. Here, there was no previous bad Kiddushin that preceded. So either this might infer that there was a good Kiddushin, or it might itself be a good Kiddushin. It's a different case. Okay. Igadar, my son say, I'm a rabbi. How do I know my position? That in a case of when it comes without a previous, without a previous bad Kiddushin, it should be okay. Or it might indicate a Kiddushin. Because our Mishnah says, Kiddushin Rishonim Shalach. But the only reason the savlanos are not a problem is because they came after a bad Kiddushin. Okay, hacha hujatoy. So that's in the case of the mikvah. He's in error because he's relying on the original act of Kiddushin. But if that didn't proceed, Havu Kiddushin, it would be Kiddushin. By the way, that sounds much more like Rashi than like Tosfos. It doesn't sound like in a normal case it proves Kiddushin took place. It sounds like in a normal case where there's not a previous Kiddushin to frame the issues, this itself constitutes Kiddushin. Anyway, that's the debate of Rashi and Tosfos. But either way, Rabbi is not saying it definitely is. The word Choshim means maybe it is, and she would require a get. Okay, which, as you can imagine, could be an interesting question about what happens when you give the engagement ring after the, let's get married, and here's an engagement ring. That's savlanus after shiduchim, they agree to get married, and then you give a gift, right? So is that all of a sudden a chash kiddushin? Okay, so maybe that's the case. The context is clear that it's meant as engagement and it's not meant as kiddushin, but it starts raising interesting questions. Let's see where the Gemara continues. The Gemara says like this. Okay, now Abaye, who's questioning this ruling, would say, no. The Mishnah is like it goes without saying. What does that mean? If it was just a sending of gifts, even after, according to Rashi, some discussion of getting married, but nothing that attempted to be an act of Kiddushin. So then clearly, if it's just gifts, we just interpret it as gifts, even after some engagement. Okay, so clearly that wouldn't mean anything. But even in a case like our case of the Mishnah, it's clear that they're attempting to do Kiddushin. In that case, maybe I should interpret the savlanis as an act of Kiddushin. Not. So it's an interesting question. Is it better to have a bad Kiddushin to have no Kiddushin? By the way, this also comes up in a case of a couple that never had any Kiddushin. Jewish men and women had, or let's say they had a secular marriage, or let's say, but nothing that even attempted to be a Jewish marriage. Would we say, well, they're living together, Kiddushay Bia, right? Or would we say, and maybe it's even more of a problem than our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah, there was a bad Kiddushin that said anything afterwards doesn't count as an act of Kiddushin. It was already framed at the beginning, and that was a bad one. Well, what if there was nothing that preceded it? Okay, does that make it better or worse? So that's partly what's being debated between Abaye and Rava. So Rava says that when there's nothing that preceded and there's some type of an act giving of gifts, either that's a signal that there was a Kiddushin, the way Tosfos reads it, or itself will interpret as a Kiddushin. And Abaye says, no, anything that happens, we will not interpret as a Kiddushin. And it's, our Mishnah is saying that even if they were attempting Kiddushin, we don't interpret something afterwards as Kiddushin. Certainly when there's no clear evidence that they were attempting Kiddushin, we're not going to interpret this act as an act of Kiddushin. As you're hearing, as I'm giving you these examples, all of this is extremely relevant for contemporary issues about, can you sort of say, if the original Kiddushin was no good, or if they never had a Kiddushin, that there's no need for a get.
So they've been living together for 10 years, and you could conclude his halachically is znut.
Well, right. I mean, because they chose to marry with secular law, not with halachic Kiddushin. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. I'm a Rav. Okay, so now, my Havila, what was the condition? I'm a Rav Papa. But also the Mikati V'Hadar Misavli, in a place that normally they start with a Kiddushin and then they send these gifts, Chayshina. Then you're sending the gifts. We're concerned that either, again, according to Rashi, you wouldn't send the gifts without Kiddushin, so the gifts themselves are Kiddushin, or that it indicates that a Kiddushin preceded. Again, there's two ways.
But if you're not saying they're Kiddushin, why are we thinking all of a sudden?
Because they are gifts. Somehow, it's not just stam, a random gift. It's a gift that, in the cultural context, is understood to be a gift that is given after Kiddushin. Okay, I don't know exactly how, presumably it was given in a certain way. There was a certain type of a thing that was given. It's not saying you gave a matana. It says you gave savlanos. So in a particular cultural context, there was an understanding. Let's say everybody a week after the Kiddushin sent a case of wine to the Kala's family. And this guy sent the case of wine without.
No, but why are you
interpreting? There was a particular context in which it was normally assumed that this is the thing that is given after Kiddushin. So how did he do this? There wasn't a Kiddushin. So it must be, we're concerned, maybe there was a Kiddushin we didn't know about. Whether Rashi says maybe he meant this to also be the Kiddushin.
Right, that's what I don't understand. I understand Tosfos, but Rashi I don't understand. In other words, if he exactly that, you're sending it as presents post Kiddushin.
right?
So how are you interpreting this as the Kiddushin?
Because nobody would have sent a post-Kiddushin present that had not also wanted this to count as Kiddushin. I understand what's pushing you for Tosfos, but there are different things in the Gemara that indicate like Rashi and indicate like Tosfos. Okay, so anyway, the Gemara says like this. Okay, so if that's normally the practice, then we're concerned that this might constitute Kiddushin. Okay, or might indicate Kiddushin. Chashina. In places where first you send the gifts and then you do Kiddushin. So obviously, lo chashina, the gifts don't mean anything. It's not a concern of Kiddushin. Now, the Gemara says, if normally you do the Kiddushin and then you send the gifts, the Gemara says it's obvious. I don't know if it's obvious. But anyway, if we're going to be concerned, obviously we'll be concerned in that case. No, the Gemara says, there's a whole question about the girsa here. We're just going to read the girsa we have. Well, most people first do the Kiddushin and then do the gifts. And some people first do the gifts and then do the Kiddushin. Let me say that I would, although it says nechush, sometimes nechush means let me be lenient. Okay, let me assume that this falls into the minority case, and these are the people that give the gift before the Kiddushin, because there's 10% of the community that does that, and I don't have to be concerned at all that there was a Kiddushin. Kamash Milan, since 90% of the community first does the Kiddushin, I have to be concerned in this case there also was a Kiddushin. Okay, so there's a lot of different gears there, but the basic point is that in a case where there's that the only time you're concerned is when the gift is a particular type of a gift that always comes after the Kiddushin, and therefore when that gift is sent, that could signal that either a Kiddushin took place or it was meant to constitute a Kiddushin. So that's not exactly, you can't exactly interpret that to be relevant to like other cases. Like if you talk about the case of, let's say, the engagement ring, okay? So dafka, the engagement ring is misavli v'hara makakshi. Right, the engagement ring is what's given before the Kiddushin. So obviously that doesn't raise a concern. Let's interpret the engagement ring as a Kiddushin, right? It only would be a case in where there's a cultural context that it's a type of a gift that comes after an act of Kiddushin. Only in that case are we concerned that that might be either signal Kiddushin or constitute a Kiddushin.
I mean, I think, at least in my mind, it's important to distinguish the Choshishin versus Vada. The Choshishin means maybe. In other words, we're not saying it is.
Right.
And it's not like, we're not saying if she, like, let's say, sleeps with another man, we wouldn't say it's adultery and she's killed.
Right, that's what I said. All this is chashina, and we're machmir that it might have been. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. So Rav Acha bar Ravuna asked Rava, Huchzak stark suva b'shuk. Now this case is Tosfos' biggest proof, because this clearly is, does a certain thing be evidence that something else happened? Okay, it was known that in the marketplace, whatever, that a woman's ksuva had been written. Mahu. Is that evidence that the fact that there's a ksuva written, that Kiddushin must have taken place?
So, I mean, no one saw it, but they think there.
Or maybe it was seen being passed around. Okay, it's not exactly sure what the Huchzak B'Shuk is. Rashi says Sharo Shar Ksuva. Okay, people saw a woman's ksuva. Okay, is that an indication that she must have had Kiddushin? So what's the story? Big deal. So you see a ksuva. That's not going to be nearly enough evidence to be.
I think it'd be great evidence.
Well, let's take a look. That we should assume that she's married. So we're going to see why. What was the conclusion? You see the exact parallel with the language of the previous sukya. In a place where Kiddushin always precedes the writing of the ksuva, now that still doesn't prove definite. Who knows what might have happened? Maybe it was pre-written or whatever. But nevertheless, if the standard is Kiddushin and then ksuva, and this ksuva has been written for this woman, that creates a concern that she's mekudeshes. If first of all they write the ksuva and the Kiddushin comes,
it'd actually be today,
which is like we do today. Yeah. So lo chashin, and obviously it's not a basis of concern. Now, so the Gemara says mekadshi v'hadar kasvi pshita. If they do the Kiddushin and then write the ksuva, of course we're concerned. What other possibility might there be? So the Gemara says, no. Let's say it's a case where the scribes are not very, are not always available. So this guy was planning on getting married in 3 months, but the scribe happened to be in town today. So even though normally you write the ksuva after, he got it written before because this was when the scribe was available. Kamash Milan, that's not enough of a basis to say we're not concerned, since the norm is that the writing comes after. The presence of a ksuva creates enough of a concern that he might be married. Again, all of this depends obviously on the context. In a context where it's common enough that there's ksuvas written before the Kiddushin, that would not be an issue. Okay.
Concerned meaning you need to identify her as an Eishetish.
Well, a suffix Eishetish.
I think Gemara doesn't ask him about this whole Siblumin issue, does it?
Well, it sort of kind of said it depends on what the practice is, whether it's first A or first B. All right.
Rally,
Yeah.
we say that his first effort of Kiddushin was not appropriate, was not fulfilling. How do we determine that? Is he
Might
the
have been
only-
fulfilling, but it wasn't fulfilled. Yes.
Is he the only one who knows that and feels a need to make it right, or is it general knowledge?
Well, that's what the Gemara was discussing before. Like a katan is general knowledge,
Right.
and even so that's a chiddush. Even if it's widely known that it wasn't good, that might then we don't say that you want the next thing to be the act of kiddushin. So so that's that's the Gemara's chiddush initially, that it's not only that maybe he didn't realize, even if it was obvious that it wasn't good, we don't interpret the next acts as the acts of kiddushin.
We went through Dr. where we say Kidashti was that.
Right.
He has to make some sort of statement when he gives you this bonus.
Well, but the Gemara says, the Tosos says that's why Rashi said that we're talking about Shidach, because the Gemara back on Vav Amud Aleph said that Asukin Boso Indian doesn't always need a statement, like if the Das is clear enough, But you are right. It could be that the reason we're saying we're not concerned about the Savlanos is because you need it to be sort of like the Gemara before about Devarim Shebelev. You need it to be a much clearer context, even if you didn't realize it wasn't Kiddushin. We're not going to turn something into Kiddushin unless it's much more clearly articulated or expressed, right? Right. Well, that gets to, like I said, why Yudah Herzl Henkin says, well, that might be true about Kiddushin Kesef, but Kiddushin Bia might be of a different character in that regard. Okay, so let's take a look at the next Mishnah. Mekadosh Isho Bita. Now, another issue. We're moving beyond Tnaim, getting into other types of scenarios. So one scenario was a very important question about the first Kiddushin wasn't good. Do you interpret later acts that way? Now, a question which is less common, of course, but a case about trying to marry somebody who you're not allowed to marry. Okay, so Hamakadosh Isho Bita. Man tries to marry at one moment a woman and her daughter, which is obviously one of the arayot in the Torah. Now, if it was sequential, he'd be married to the woman and not marry, and then 10 minutes later tried to marry the daughter, it wouldn't take effect. But he tried to marry them both at the same time. Okay, so Isha v'achota, or two sisters, ka'achat, in one moment, like he gave one of them money and said, or gave a third party the money to be kona and to be makabel the kiddushin for these two women. Einan mikudesha, neither of them are married. Okay, since you haven't identified one, neither of them are married.
We don't say brera either.
Right, or whatever.
Pick whichever one you want.
There's a story with 5 women, a group of 5 women. Among them were 2 women. Two sisters, excuse me. 5 women, among them 2 sisters. When a certain person picked a basket full of figs. And now there's like a whole series of things why it shouldn't be a concern of Kiddushin. It was their figs, okay. The Shoshrias I said it was Shemitah, so maybe he didn't really own the figs, or whatever. We'll see what the Shemitah issue is about, okay. The Amma, and he said, or maybe because it was Shemitah, even though it was theirs, he was able to take possession of them because it was Efker. Anyway, that's like an interesting detail, which we'll have to get back to. But the key for us is the end. He says, I'm marrying all of you with this basket. And one of them took the basket on behalf of all of them. On behalf of all of them. Well, I don't know about the other 3, but the sisters aren't married. Because since there are 2 sisters here, he's trying to marry 2 sisters at once. Neither of them are married. Okay, so let's take a look at the Gemara to explain what this is based on. Nani Mili, where does this come from? Amar Rami Bar Chama, the pasuk says, a woman with her sister you shall not take to create enmity against them in their life. So he wants to say that's pshat in the pasuk, or one way to read the pasuk. If you try to take them both, at the same time, like litzror, at the moment when they become tzroros, So if you're trying to take them at the same time, then lo tikach, the kiddushin won't take effect. Okay, so that's like pshat in the pasuk. Okay. How do you read the end of the pasuk? That if you do this, you get kares if you transgress this. If you didn't marry either of them, so you don't get kares for sleeping with 2 sisters, you get kares for sleeping with the sister of your wife's sister. You have to be married to one of them to get kares for having sex with the other one. So if that's the scenario of the pasuk is telling you the Kiddushin isn't binding with either, then there would be no kares, right? So clearly the pasukim is talking about you married one, don't sleep with the other one, and then you'll get kares with the other one. Okay, so clearly it's not sequential. Elamar Rava, so rather Rava says, clearly the pasuk is sequential. So if that's true, what's the basis of the teaching of our Mishnah? That the Kiddushin isn't chal for like either of them. Umasnisin kid Rabbi, like Rabbi's teaching. Dama Rabba, famous teaching of Rabba, which now we're going to focus on. Kol she'eno b'zechar zeh, afilu b'vas achas eno. If something would work sequentially, then it doesn't work at the same time. If you tried to marry Rachel, and then afterwards you married Leah, well, we'll put Yaakov Avinu aside. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't be chal for Leah. So when he tries to do Rachel and Leah at the same time, since there's no sequence, and since for one of them it definitely wouldn't work after the other, so then therefore you try to do them both, it works for neither. Okay, so that's the principle. If it wouldn't work sequential, and then you try to do it at the same time, since you can't choose at the same time which is first and which is second, and it's never going to work for the second one, then in that case it doesn't work for either one. Yes,
Yeah, I know I've asked this kind of question before, and I just never knew what the answer is. So in the case of the Tainim, where
right,
one accepts on behalf of them, is the woman then later on trusted to say, "Of course we're not going to show. This is a joke. He's giving us our thing. I just accepted it because it's ours."
That gets to the Dvarim Shebelev issue. You can't claim it's a joke. Now, if there's cases of like Hanan Sadi and so on, and that happens, a lot of there's a whole huge literature on somebody that gave a woman Kesef Kiddushin before Adim, and then they basically said, well, we were just kidding around. And sadly, it happened just a few years ago at SAR. It happens a lot in these non-Orthodox high schools. I know maybe sometimes in the Haredi high schools as well, but non-Orthodox because there's boys and girls in the same school, and sometimes they, for whatever reason, decide learning Maseches Kiddushin that year. So I'm serious. This happens like more than you would believe, and the kids are kidding around, and they say, oh, okay, and then there are two kids, and then there are two bar mitzvah boys in the room or whatever. They had this case a few years ago at SAR.
Seriously?
Yeah, I'm totally serious. It happens. Much more than you would
They
imagine.
wrote a get for this.
No, because you don't want to do that, obviously, because then she's obviously can't marry a Kohen. So you have to try to bring evidence that it was clearly Mishat. It was clearly Derek's Schok. But the question is, what to create sufficient evidence? Because that's like the Gemara before about Dvarim Shebelev Einam Dvarim. Well, why don't you just say all the time it's Derek?
But does she have to say yes, okay? or just?
No, she accepts it like under a chuppah. So you accept it. That's Kiddushin. So
she doesn't have to say yes.
She doesn't have to say yes. So that's it. You can't just, on the one hand, you can't stam say I was kidding around. On the other hand, sometimes it's obvious, like we talked about yesterday. Dvarim Shebelev Kol Adam, Hanan Sadi. It was obvious it was Derek Schok. But what's the sufficient threshold for that? A lot of chuvas in Rav Moshe about these scenarios. Okay, back to the Gemara. Eisvei Abai. So this is Rabba's explanation that since if it happened sequentially, it wouldn't work with the second one. When it comes at the same time, and there's no first and there's no second, it doesn't work with either. So let's see if this is true. Eisvei Abai. Hamar b'maser perosav mitukanim u'masrosav mikukalim. You take extra maser. You have 10 units of grain, and you take 2 units to serve as maser, as opposed to 1. Okay, so your grain is fixed because you did take 10% of your grain, but your meiser now is makukah, is a mixture of meiser and tevel, right? Because it's so here basically.
A marbe b'maser.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, here's my 9 units, and I take 10 and 11 as my ma'aser. Okay, so, let's say one of them. This one is meiser, fixes all of this, makes this mitukan, and makes this ma'aser. This one, let's say you knew which was which, it was afterwards. This one would be part of all my other grain, my tevel grain. Okay, so right now, since I took both of these as ma'aser, it's a mixture of ma'aser and tevel mixed up. One of those units is maser and fixed this, and one of them is from grain that hasn't had meiser taken and is tevel. So it's tevel and maser mu'ravim. The problem is you don't know which is which. Okay, so but we
so we're not talking about a case where you have 100 all in front of you and you took 11.
No, that might be a case of that might be a case of what do you call it of maser and chul and mu'ravim. But anyway, I'd have to figure that case out. But okay, let's not worry about that right now. Anyway, in this case, it's Maser v'Tevel Mu'ravim. But the question is, that would be if you took them sequentially. but you took them at the same time. Okay, so but we treat it as if they were sequential, and we don't know which is which.
No
So-
option to give more than 10%.
No,
Forbidden to
that's
give more
only true. Meiser is exact. So if you think about the case of the sisters, if we would say, well, one worked and the other isn't, and we don't know which one, then by the sisters we should say you're married to one and we don't know which one. But what we don't, we say since we don't know which, then you're not married to either. So since we should say here, well, we don't know which is Masa and which is Tevel, like they're both Tevel. Why don't we say that? Okay, so the Gemara says, "Ve'amai." Why is this true? Name a koshein of zeh. Since you can't do one after the other, since you can't take a maser after a maser, so I feel about saying. So when you do them at the same time, the second one isn't maser, so the first one shouldn't be maser either. I mean, they're both at the same time. You can't pick which is which. They're both. Why don't we say they're both tevel? So Amalei, no, Shani Maser de Isa L'Chatzayim. Maser is different because it can come halfway. What does that mean? If you would say every half of each grain is Maser, Kadsha, it would work. So let's say here, these two things, basically saying you don't in a way have to choose. Because basically, if you have, I don't know, if each one of these units is 100 grains, okay, there's 100 grains in each unit. Literally, like kernels. Okay, this is 100 grains. It's not like, oh, there's 100 grains that's maser and 100 at tevel, and we don't know which one. No, all 200 are maser. Half of every single grain of all the 200 grains are maser. So therefore, in a certain way, what we're saying is, in this case, you don't have to say like it happens on one pile and not the other, and we don't know which pile. There's a way conceptually to say it happened to the whole pile. And all the grains were maser, half of each grain. And since you could say that about the whole pile, therefore we're allowed to say that it worked. Okay, but you can't say half of each sister is married to me. Okay, you have to pick which one. And since you didn't know which one, you say it doesn't occur to either. All right, so the Gemara says like this. The better half, right? Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Okay. Varei Maser Behema. How about Meiser Behema?
Yeah.
The Leka Lechatzoy. You can't have half of an animal Meiser Behema.
That's a very very nice comparison. Meiser Behema to the Kiddushin.
Well, no, Meiser Behema to Meiser grade for that.
Okay.
The Leka Bezecher is that, and it can't happen sequential. Once you take one animal as Maser, you walk them through the gate, the new animals that are born. The 10th one is Maser. If you've made the 10th one Maser, the 11th one doesn't become Maser. Okay? And for Amarava, Yotzu Shnaim Be'asiri, the two animals, you did 9 animals walked out of the gate, and then when the 10th one was supposed to walk out, 2 walked out at the same time. Okay? The Karan Asiri, and you called them both 10. You said to both of them at the same time. Okay? So one of them is 10, one is 11, but you called them both 10, and they can't both be 10. And so why don't you say, well, since you don't know which one is, neither is. No, you don't say that. You say, Asiri V'chadasamu Rabim Zebzeh. 10 and 11 are mixed up. One is one is the other. You don't know which is which. And then you have to figure out how that works in terms of bringing it as a korban or waiting for a mum. That we're not going to worry about that. But basically, that seems like a really nice parallel. So say here too, one of the sisters is married to you. You just don't know which one. The verse says no. Shani Maser Behema de Isa Betos. Now, Maser Behema is different because number 10 will be Maser even if you miscounted it. Okay? And therefore, because there's something about the objective fact that it is the 10th that defines it as Maser, your non-designation or your wrong designation is not as consequential. It's not all dependent on you. It happens somewhat automatically. Okay, it's not like we taught in the Mishnah. I mean, to some degree, it's dependent on you. But anyway, Karla Chia Siri, if you have, they were walking out of your gate and you sort of got all confused, all for tumult. So when 9 walked out, you said 10. Then you go, oh, no, that wasn't 10. So Asiri, then the 10th walked out and you said 9 to number 10. Well, Achadasar Asiri, and then 11 you said 10. Shloshim Mikudashos. Okay, they're all Kadosh, but only one of them, it's very confusing. Anyway, they're all Kadosh, but they're not all Maser. Only the 10th one is Maser. In that case, the other 2 have Kedusha, like Shlamim. But the bottom line is that even though you called number 10 9, it still had Kedusha. It still became Maser. So in that case, since to some degree it's going to be Maser by virtue of being the 10th, when you call 10 and 11 10, we don't say, well, neither of them. You can't happen to both, so neither of them. Because even if there's obviously some error here, one of them is going to be number 10. So that works a little bit easier. Okay, whereas again, so in one case it works easier because both of the whole pile, all 200 pieces of grain can all be maser, half of each grain. So therefore, it can work together. This case can sort of work together because to some degree, even if you made a mistake how to count it, it's still going to be maser. But in a case where it's all dependent on you and it can't happen to both, we'll say it will happen to neither. Okay, so let's take a look. So the Gemara says like this: the harei toda, the leisibatos. What about 1 minute? The bread associated with a korban toda, that will not work if it's an error. The leisibatos it won't work one after the other. With every korban toda, you would bring 40 loaves of bread, 30 matzah and 10 chametz, you wouldn't bring the chametz on the mizbeach. You don't bring chametz on the mizbeach. But anyway, you would shech the korban toda. And you would have kavana that with the shechting of the korban toda that would sanctify the loaves of bread. They would be seen as connected to the korban toda, and there would be 40. Now, if you were in error, you were thinking about a different 40 loaves than the ones that were brought or were sanctified or whatever. Then the ones that were that were intended for the toda would not become kadosh. It doesn't work if it's an error. It also doesn't work b'zeh chazeh. After you slaughter the toda and sanctify 40 loaves, extra loaves cannot become kadosh. Okay, so it won't work by itself, by error. It won't work b'zeh chazeh. And here's the case. The Idman, it was taught, Toda shenishcheta al shmonim chalot. Somebody brought 80 chalot, okay, and you shechted the Toda on twice the amount. So we should say, following the logic, that since it can't work on 40 of them, then it doesn't work on the second 40. It doesn't work on any 40 because you don't know which is which, like the two sisters, okay? Chizkiah Amar Kachile Arba'im Mitoch Shmonim. 40 are sanctified. You just know which ones. Yomi Amar Lo Kachile Arba'im Mitoch Shmonim. None of them are. So at least according to Chizkiah, that contradicts Rabbi. Rabbi Yochanan is consistent, but Chizkiah says it still works. So how do you explain Chizkiah? So the Gemara says, Idmar, what was taught about that? Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Kol Modim, Kol Echad Amar Kachile Arba'im Mitoch Shmonim. Everybody agrees that if you say 40 out of the 80 should be sanctified, Kachi, that it would work, okay? Because you're not trying to sanctify the whole 80. You said 40 of them. You just didn't specify which 40. That's different. That's like if you were to take the two sisters and say, I'm marrying one of you. I'm not saying which one, okay? So then it works. We some 40, we don't know which 40, but you're not trying to do both. You're only trying to do one. That works. You just don't know which one, okay? I'm not sanctifying 40 unless it works for all 80. I only want it to work for everything, and I don't want it to work halfway. In that case, low cutting, everybody would agree it would not work. Since it can't work for everything, it doesn't work for any. And we're assuming that the case of the two sisters is implicitly that. I'm marrying both of you, okay? So what's the debate? Lo nechlaku el b'stam. You didn't specify. You just said, you just brought your 80 loaves. You didn't say what you were doing. That basically the purpose of the 80 is you only want 40 to be sanctified, and the other 40 are a backup. But your intent is only for 40 to be sanctified, and therefore 40 are sanctified. Umar Savra, and the other one says, no, you're trying to make all 80, and therefore it doesn't work. So bottom line, the way that we've explained why Chizkiah says that 40 are sanctified is because we say fundamentally you are only trying to sanctify 40. Okay, but if you're trying to do it on both, neither works. So we have now basically dealt with some very good challenges to Rabbah, but the Gemara is asserting the logic of Rabbah's position. But the point is, if it won't work sequentially, then when you do it at the same time and you're trying to do it to both and you haven't specified which is which, since it can't work for one of them, it doesn't work for either of them. Okay, there are exceptions to the rule when things will work by themselves, because, or when things can work even on a half grain. Okay, but fundamentally, if you're trying to do it to both and it can't work for both, and you haven't specified any order, then it doesn't work for either. That's Rabba's position. Yes.
If master has to be exact,
yes.
And if you're doing it on a half a grain, what's the other half?
So that is still maser and tevel mixed together. Okay, that's the conclusion. But we don't say that, well, it shouldn't work at all because you didn't specify which. I did specify which. All the grain is maser, half of each one. So, I mean, you could say you didn't specify which half, but somehow because you're dealing with all of the grain, that's seen as not the exact.
So what do you give over then? All of it? Even
no, now you're stuck. Now what you have to do is you have to make other grain to be mafresh on the half that's the tevel of the maser grain. Okay, that's why it says it's mikul kolam. Like what you give the Levi now is a mess.
You can fix it.
He can right now can't be eaten. It has to be fixed. Yeah.
So according to Chizkiah's position, he might hold Dvarim Shebalev Dvarim.
No, I mean, look, the issue about Dvarim Shebalev Einam Dvarim is always the question, because sometimes it's not like it's. Is when you clearly when the presumption, like there's a clear presumption of a certain thing, and then we insert in also what you're thinking. But there are cases where it's not at all clear what you're intending. I just brought 80 loaves. So, okay, let's say we say that. Therefore what? Therefore you only meant 40, or therefore you meant all 80. There's no default. Means we can't try to guess what you're thinking to change our default assumption of the case. There are some cases that there's no default assumption. We have no idea what you meant by this. You brought 80 loaves. You're supposed to bring 40. What were you thinking? Who the heck knows? What did you mean by it? So, okay, we can't go by what you're thinking. Then what should we assume? We have to assume something, right? So, Drum Shabalev does not mean that we never try to figure out a case that's not explicit, because there are a lot of cases that are inherently ambiguous, and we have to try to give it a halachic meaning. All right. Now, whether we really, in those cases, are trying to guess at what somebody is thinking, or what we're really trying to say is the law is going to define how that case is treated, I would agree with that, because if what they're really saying is Chizki and Rabbi Yochanan saying, no, I bet this is what he's thinking, then the obvious question is, well, why don't we ask? Why don't we look for other contextual clues? Why isn't it different based on the circumstances? So at the end of the day, what they're really saying is, since we don't know what he's thinking, we have to decide what he's thinking. Okay, we have to just come up with a rule about how to treat that case. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. Now, Virava, now why did Rava explain like Rabbi that the explanation of our Mishnah was if it doesn't work sequentially, it doesn't work at the same time, right? That's what Rava said. Rabbi made a general statement, not about our Mishnah. Things that don't work sequentially don't work at the same time. He says that's why you can't marry two sisters, neither of them are married. Why do you have to give that answer? There's a better answer. What's the better answer? Or an answer that we're going to see in a minute. That's Rava's own position. Tape play, Kiddushin she'ein mesurin l'bia ninu. So we're about to see in 1 minute, literally the next line, that Rava's of the position that a Kiddushin that can never be halachically consummated is not a Kiddushin. Now, what that means is, even if I didn't do it at the same time, okay, if I went over to two sisters and I'm saying, I'm marrying one of you, okay, and I didn't say which one, or maybe that sounds a little bizarre, so here's another case. I go to a father and I say, you know, I want to marry your daughter. And he has two daughters. And he says, great. And he takes the money. We didn't say which daughter. Okay, so would you say I'm married to one of them and I don't know which one and I have to give a get? Or do you say, no, that's the case. I only wanted to marry one. Or do you say no? Because since I can't have sex with either one, because why not? Because it might be the other one that I'm not married to, and then it would be the Isra Arayos. So therefore, the Kiddushin is never binding, because it's a Kiddushin that can never lead to consummation, because there's a possible Isra Arayos. It might be the other one, and I would never know. That's called Kiddushin Shein Mesurin L'Bia. So the Gemara says, since that's Rava's position in general, you don't have to say the problem in the Mishnah was that they were at the same time. The Mishnah would be a problem even if it was only one of them and you didn't know which one, even if it wasn't the same time. It had nothing to do with them being at the same time. There's an easier answer. It's a Kiddushin when it's not clear which one that can never be consummated. So why isn't that the issue? So the Gemara says, the Dvar of Rabbi Bar Chama. No, he was saying according to Rabbi Bar Chama that didn't take that approach, that Kiddushin Shein L'Bia. He said, even if you don't agree with me in general, you can't do them both at the same time. If you're trying to do both of them, since one of them it won't work for either. My position is you can't even do one if you don't know which one. But you certainly can't do both, because then if it doesn't work for number two, it's not going to work for number one. Okay, now this is the segue to get into Rava's position, which is even goes further than the Mishnah.
The Gemara, this is like a ridiculous question, I think. But like the Gemara doesn't care about like Yaakov Avinu and the two sisters.
Well, here it doesn't. I mean, whatever. That gets discussed elsewhere. I mean, that was before Matan Torah or whatever.
Yeah, all that.
You know,
okay.
Itmar, Kiddushin Shein Mesurin L'Bia. Now we're going to talk about this. A Kiddushin that cannot ultimately be consummated halachically. Okay, Abai Amar Havi Kiddushin, it still takes effect. Rav Amar Lo Havi Kiddushin, it doesn't. Now, by the way, right? How about a question which is Chuppah Sheina Mesura L'Bia? Meaning, there's a whole interesting question about Chuppah's Nida. If one is a Nida during the Chuppah, according to the Rambam, he says it's not a real Chuppah and you don't make Sheva brachas. I mean, Sfardim don't paskin that, because if they did, obviously it would be a big problem. Like, what, we're going to have a whole wedding and not make Sheva brachas? Whatever. I've announced to everybody that the woman's a Nida. But anyway, that's Chuppah Sheina Mesura L'Bia, because for Chuppah is the Nisuin, is when they're supposed to now be consummating their marriage, right? This is when the marriage is supposed to translate into the fully lived marriage. And the whole idea of Chuppah, according to some, is yichud, privacy, the ability to have sex and so on, to be in private, to share domicile, to be intimate and so on. So that's like a different question. question. But here we're talking just about the Kiddushin, just the on-paper marriage, not yet the lived marriage. But nevertheless, even though we're just talking about the Kiddushin, maybe if the Kiddushin can never translate to the Nisuin, can never translate to a life of physical intimacy and of sex, then it's not even binding as Kiddushin. Okay, but again, I want to emphasize that there's a chiddush here that we're talking even at the earlier stage of Kiddushin, when you're not really yet up to the stage of sex. But if it can never ultimately lead to that, maybe it's not even a good.
I'm saying you never, as opposed to, in other words, because in our weddings, it's both at the same time. The Kiddushin, more or less, the Kiddushin and the chuppah. So if she's Anita, it's not
yeah. Here it would be never, right? Right. So yes, the question here is a case of never. Chuppah's nida, on the one hand, right, it's more of a problem there because you're talking about nisuin, and because it's more of a problem, you're talking about nisuin, it means even at that moment, if they can't be having sex because she's a nida, according to the position of the Rambam. So here, the chiddush is that we're not talking about that. We're talking at an earlier stage of Kiddushin, where it's just an on-paper marriage. Maybe that shouldn't be as relevant, and because it's not as relevant, like nida is certainly not a problem. The only thing that possibly is a problem here is this case when it will never be able to translate.
So even in a case where it's chuppah's nida, we still say that she's
Kiddushin is valid. Yeah. Nobody ever questions Kiddushin nida is valid.
So you have to find another reason to invalidate it.
Exactly. So, but 100%. So, okay, but here it's a Kiddushin that can never lead to consummation. Is that going to be good? Okay, Itmar Kiddushin shein Mr. the Bia. Abayam or have a Kiddushin, it still works. Ravam or lo have a Kiddushin, it doesn't work. And the case that we're going to see is this case where somebody doesn't know which sister he married. So it's something that can never be clarified, and therefore he can never consummate because he always might be having sex with the sister, with his wife's sister. So Amar Rava Barahina, Amar Rava. So Rava said Barahina asperally. Barahina sort of explained to me, based this position of mine on a pasuk, which is the following one. If a man takes a woman and has sex with her, Kiddushin, I'm certain to be Kiddushin. So Yikach has to be able to ultimately lead to Ube'Allah. It has to be able to be given over to Bia. Okay, Kiddushin she'ein certain to be. If it can never lead to Bia, lo avi Kiddushin doesn't take effect. Now, I just want to pause for a second because Tosfos asked the obvious question, which is, well, then why should Kiddushi by Isurei Lavin, work? Like when it says like a Kohen can't marry a Grusha or an Almana. Right? Why does that work? That's not, there it's not Mr. in the Bia. You're not supposed to be having sex, right? The Kiddushin. So he doesn't exactly give an answer according to Rashi. One could speculate, well, it's not as us or as kares. What we mean is like it's completely, a huge violation. You could also say that by those types of things, by the cases of like Mamzer and Kohen Grusha and Kohen Gadol Amana, the primary Isser as framed in the Torah is not an Isser of sex, but an Isser of marriage. Right, the Torah says like lo yikach, right? Lo yikachu. So maybe that's very different even though the primary issue is framed in terms of the marriage as opposed to being framed in terms of the sex. Nevertheless, because of this question, Tosfos suggests a different read of Kiddushin she'ein Misurin the Bia. Tosfos actually says it is the act of Kiddushin itself that makes the Bia prohibited. Meaning, if I never would have married this one sister, and I don't know which one, then I could have had sex with her. Because, right, the Isser is created as opposed to a case of my sister, right? The Kiddushin doesn't create. If there was a woman that, I don't know, here's a case. I didn't know, somebody didn't know whether this person was his sister or not, right? And it was not knowable. A woman had a child, didn't know who the father was. It might have been my father. This woman might be my sister. If I do Kiddushin with her, is it Suffolk Kiddushin or not? Would you say, well, it's a Mr. in Libya. It's not, never be able to have sex because she might be my sister. So Rashi might say that would be a case of a Mr. in Libya. Tosfos says it would not. She'd be Suffolk Mekudeshes. Because the case of Kiddushin and Mr. in Libya is the act of Kiddushin is what makes it forbidden to have sex with her. When I marry one of two sisters, it's only because I did an act of Kiddushin that I now can't have sex. Is that clear? Because the only Isser is sex with my wife's sister. The other case would be Isha Bita, a woman and her daughter. Only because if I married a woman, one of the two, a woman and her daughter, and I didn't know which one, it's only because of the act of Kiddushin that I can't have sex with them. Okay? So Tosfos says Kiddushin she'ein Misurin Libia is not just that sex isn't possible, because there's other cases, Isurei Lavin, where it certainly takes effect. The case I gave you, somebody might be a sister, and we don't know. Okay? Suffolk is the sister, we can't figure it out. Tosfos would say that would be a Suffolk Kiddushin. The case here is that the Kiddushin created the Isser Bia. If the Kiddushin is what makes Bia impossible, that can't be a type of a Kiddushin. Okay, so that's a nice, more nuanced read of that. Okay, so now the Gemara continues like this. Now, we taught in the Mishnah. Hamakadosh Ishu Bita. If a man marries a woman and her daughter, o isha v'achota, or two sisters, ka'achat, both at the same time, eina mikudashot, they're not married. Ha'achas me'isha bita me'isha v'achota. It sounds like if he married one and he didn't know which one, mukudeshet would work. The only problem is that they were at the same time.
Sure, if you didn't know which one, then what we do? Do we get to both?
You have to give a get to each one. The amai, why would that work? Kiddushin is certainly being. It's not. It's a kiddushin that won't be able to translate into sex. Tiyufta de Rav, there's a clear contradiction going to Rav. That's exactly the case that Rav said it doesn't work, and the Mishnah implies that it does, because the Mishnah says it only doesn't work if they're at the same time. So Amalcha Rava would say to you, the Taimech Ema Sefer, according to you, let's look at the end of the Mishnah. Ma'isa b'chamisha nashim b'hen shtei achayot v'liket echad kalkala shel te'enim v'shalen hayta v'shashvit hayta v'amarei kulchem mekudashot li b'kalkala zo. So marrying those 5 women with the basket of figs. V'amru chachamim ein achayot mekudashot. The sisters are not married. Achayeru deina mekudashot. The sisters aren't married. Hanachayot mekudashot. It sounds like the other 3 women are married. Hechidami. Now what's the case? Ilim v'dama kulchem. So if he said, I want to marry all 5 of you, and then it wound up that 2 didn't work for because they were sisters. So it's like somebody said, like, I want to marry, I like you and a donkey should take possession of this. Okay, so if I try to pass over possession of an object to 2 people, one of them being a donkey, actually the original case in the Gemara is one of them was a living person, and the other was a fetus that had not yet been born. Okay, and I tried to transfer ownership to both the person in front of me, half to him and half to the fetus, and it doesn't work. Since it doesn't work to the fetus, it doesn't work to the person. So if the whole package doesn't work, it doesn't work for any. Of course, there it's a little different. There are the people taking possession. Here are the people being possessed. But anyway, the Gemara says it's like you and this donkey should take possession. The at v'chamor lo kana, and then neither takes possession. So here too, if I tried to marry all 5 and it didn't work for 2, it doesn't work for any. So why does the Mishnah sound like it still works for 3 of them? Elalaf, so the Mishnah that makes it sound like the Kiddushin works for those that aren't a sister, the Amarlu achas miken. It must be the case in the Mishnah is not I try to say I want to marry all 5 of you. It says I want to marry one of you. It's not exactly what Pshat of the Mishnah is, but anyway. And therefore, it doesn't work for the sisters, but the other 3 are Safek Mikudashas. One of the other 3 is married to me, we don't know which one. But the sisters definitely not. So what he does is, because he claims that there's no way it could work for the 3 if I tried to marry all of them, he's reading the end of the Mishnah that I only tried to marry one of them. And then that's completely consistent with Rava. I only tried to marry one of them, and nevertheless, I'm not married to either sister, even though I only tried to marry one. So the sister, neither of the sisters are married, even though I only tried to marry one. So the Rava kasha ratio for Rava, the beginning of the Mishnah is difficult because it sounds like it's only because I tried to do both it didn't work. Rabbi kasha say for Rabbi the end is difficult. The end makes it sound like even if I tried to do just one, it wouldn't work. So the Gemara says Abai mitarz l'taimei, Rava mitarz l'taimei and Abai mitarz l'taimei and Rava mitarz l'taimei. Each one can explain the other half of the Mishnah. Abai mitarz l'taimei. Abai explained according to his reasoning. According to Abai, it only doesn't work if you try to do them at the same time. If we try to do only one of them, or she would be. If you said one and didn't specify one, then one would be married. You wouldn't know which one. You'd have to give a get to both, but at least it would work, even if you didn't know which one. But if he said explicitly, I will marry the woman who I'm able to have sex with. In that case, then neither is married because there'll no way he'll be either to have sex with either one.
Because that's Kiddushin Mesur and Labia. That's
right. If you explicitly stipulate it has to be Mesur and Labia, it won't work. And there's a story of these 5 women and 2 sisters. So Abai sticks into the last case because again the Gemara is now insisting. Right, exactly. The Gemara is now insisting that the last case is a case where he said only one of you. So since he said only one of you, as long as we're going to stick that into the end of the Mishnah, Abai is also going to stick into the end of the Mishnah that he said only one of you who is fit for me, who I'm able to have sex with. And in that case, the sisters not. Okay, so Abai got rid of the end of the Mishnah. I mean, the end of the Mishnah, the simple shot of the Mishnah was like Abai, but since we insisted that the end of the Mishnah was one of you, Abai said, well, as long as we're saying the end of the Mishnah means one of you, it'll also mean one of you who's Roy to me, who's Roy Lapia. That's how he deals with it. The bigger question is Rava. How does Rava explain why the beginning of the Mishnah only talked about not being able to marry two sisters at once. According to Rava, you can't marry even one of them if you don't know which one. So the Gemara says, "V'Rava mitaritz l'taimei hamakadosh achas meisha bita." Don't read the Mishnah ki'achat at the same time. No, if you tried to marry only one of a mother and a daughter, and you didn't say which one, or achas meisha v'achota, or one of the sisters. It's like you did it at the same time. So even though the Mishnah says you can't do it at the same time, Rava's reading the Mishnah is basically saying if you try to even do one of them without specifying, it's like trying to do it at the same time and it doesn't work. And he said, here, behold, all five of you, and one of the, or any, or, actually here it's a little bit different. It's not just one of the five of you. Now we're actually nuancing it a little bit different. All three of you, plus one of these two sisters is married to me. Okay. So the three sisters, the three others, yes, but the one of the two sisters, no. Okay, neither of the two sisters. Anyway, bottom line is, although the simple sense of the Mishnah is talking about that you can't do two sisters at once, because of the end of the Mishnah, we're insisting that even one of them doesn't work, so the end of the Mishnah supports Rava, so Rava has a way of explaining away the beginning of the Mishnah. Okay, so we have still this debate of Abai and Rava, whereas according to Abai, it's only you can't do two at once. According to Rava, you can't even do one if you're not specific which one. Let's try to read one more case. Tashma. Hamikadish es bito stam. Eno bugeres bichlal. If I marry off my daughter, and I don't say which daughter I'm marrying off, so my adult daughters are not included, clearly, because I'm not empowered to marry them. Haktanot bichlal. But what it sounds like is any of my younger daughters, my minor daughters, are Suffolk married. Okay, so Michael gave me a ring, and I accepted it on behalf of one of my daughters, one of my non-existent daughters, and I didn't say which one. So clearly, it's not talking about my adult ones, but it's talking about one of my minor ones. But one married. That's exactly Rava's case. Marrying a sister and not knowing which sister you married. Why does that work? Let's say that one of my daughters is married. We don't know which one. Kiddushin shein nisuin lebiyaninu. Tifta de Rava. It's a contradiction to Rava. Amalcha Rava. So Rava will say to you, no. I don't have many adult and minor daughters. I have one adult daughter and one minor daughter. And what it's saying is, when I took the ring, it wasn't for my adult daughter, it was for my minor one. That's pretty obvious. The Gemara says, Bogros Ktani, but Bogros is plural. So it sounds like I have multiple adult daughters and therefore multiple minor daughters. No, my Bogros Dalma means any adult daughters that any person might have, but somehow it means in this case you only have one. If that's true, obviously. I mean, what's the chiddush? If the case was telling me that I had multiple minor daughters and it worked, the chiddush would be against Rava. The chiddush would be one of the daughters is married. We don't know which one. But in this case, of course, I can't marry my adult daughter. I'm not empowered to. And if I only have one minor daughter, of course, he is married to her.
No, not choshesh. You're appointed by Shaliach.
Oh, so not only are we not choshesh, we could be talking about a case that my adult daughter made me a Shaliach and said, "Dad, I want you to find a nice guy and marry me to him." So I've been empowered as a Shaliach by my adult daughter, and I have a minor daughter. In that case, it's reasonable to think maybe I was marrying off my adult daughter. Okay, never So if I'm accepting Kiddushin, I'm thinking because of my adult daughter. She's getting older already. She's 13. Needs to get a chassan finally. Kamash Milan. No, I wouldn't marry my adult one because my daughter one, I'll get to pocket the kesef Kiddushin. So obviously, I wouldn't go with my adult daughter first. I'd rather pocket the money that I get from my younger daughter. The Gemara says, anyway, the Gemara says like this. 1 minute. Milo askina de amrle kiddushi lididach. Now, come on. The case has to be talking that presumably would include a case that the adult daughter would say, "Dad, marry me off, and I'll tell you what, you can even keep the ring for yourself." And so the Gemara says, no, even in that scenario, we're not concerned I'll marry my adult daughter first. Why? I have a primary responsibility to marry off my minor daughters. Once she's 13, she's on her own. If I'm going to do it for her, I'm just being nice. Okay, but I really have to make sure my minor daughters get married off, so I won't do my adult daughter before the minor. It's so funny because logically you would say, like you say, lo yaseh came in komenu. Like if I have a daughter getting older and one that's still young, I'm going to worry first about the one that's getting older. Anyway, the Gemara rereads it to be that scenario, so it's not a problem against Rava. But again, the simple sense of a lot of this evidence is against Rava. That if you say one daughter and you don't say which one, one sister, it sounds like it would work. Rava is insisting that it will not work. We're going to continue with this tomorrow.
Okay, so